This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it.
Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, stop cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's Tuesday. It's primary election day, my friends. It's time to go to the polls if you haven't yet. Most people don't turn out for such midterm, middle-of-the-year elections like this. But, hey, some things of interest going on today. Todd Courser will be back on the ballot. Cindy Gamrett back on the ballot for this special primary election for those two. Whoever makes it through in Lapeer and Allegan counties today will stand for election on March the 8th, which is the same. They're doing it that day because that's the day of the Michigan primary. It makes it a bit easier and not quite as expensive, but it will cost six figures. Lapeer and Allegan County voters will be pitching in six figures. The real cost, which is yet to be determined, also includes the circus-like sideshow the two will put on for the rest of us. And like I said, taxpayers left with the bill. I just hope that this brings it all to an end, finally. This sort of affair began with the extra medal affair, as you already know. In and of itself, not that shocking, but then, of course, Courser tries to tell a story about himself with a male prostitute and it just spun out of control from there. Please, people, do the right thing. Vote here. Let's be done with this one, shall we? We have more important things to deal with than their problems. I did get an email from Courser yesterday, by the way, and I'll read a couple of things. Regarding the extortion plot, writes Todd Courser, I have a subpoena that I personally will be delivering in the morning to the prosecutor to release. This was supposed to be yesterday morning. He was supposed to deliver it to release the police report. This crime was committed against two sitting state representatives, and the perpetrators need to be exposed and prosecuted. Now, he wrote that, and then there's nothing else. There's no follow-up to it. I don't believe anything was ever. Yeah, I don't know if it was, if it was served, whatever. Then the next email, hey, if you guys want to know where I'm voting on Tuesday, get a hold of me. Here's my phone number. And nobody cares. Todd. Come take pictures of me voting, which I'm sure people will, but it's like, really, it's just ignore this. Just make it go away, please. All right. I'm glad you get a second chance, and I'm glad you're getting a second chance, but move along. Meanwhile, this Russian airliner that went down, gathering a lot of attention. Now the Americans have decided to release information that one of our satellites saw a heat flash, some sort of a heat flash, at the point that this plane began to descend and lose altitude, and 224 people were killed. People are saying it's too early to determine a cause. ICE is claiming responsibility. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that they have the capability, not for a surface-to-air missile, but don't have the technology for that. However, some people believe, they may have been able to get a bomb onto the plane. That's a possibility, which would certainly up the ante for all of us. That would just mean that the JV team had figured out how to, get onto airliners and blow them out of the sky. Flight 9268, as you probably know, was on its way from the Egyptian resort to St. Petersburg early Saturday when it dropped off radar about 23 minutes into the flight. There was nothing abnormal before the plane crashed, said Egyptian Civil Aviation Minister Hossam Kamel. The U.S. satellite that was over the Sinai at the time of the crash detected a heat flash, according to a U.S. official directly familiar with the latest information in the investigation. U.S. intelligence and military officials are analyzing the data to determine whether the flash occurred in midair or on the ground. and what that can tell them about what happened to the plane. It could be range. I mean, there could be all sorts of possibilities here. It could be a missile. It could be a bomb. It could be it could be an exploding, malfunctioning engine on the plane. You know, it's just hard to say. It's too early, I would say. But we're keeping an eye on that. Meanwhile, President Barack Obama on Monday decided that all sorts of folks need a second chance. Now, and he says this as he's changing a lot of the mandatory sentencing and releasing people from prison. He says that he has a series of initiatives to help ex-cons as they rejoin society. The administration noting that 600,000 Americans are released from prison each year, and more resources for rehabilitation are necessary to keep them from reoffending. Take clip 1.
We're taking 2 new actions to create more success stories like this. These are actions that I can take as president through my executive authorities. Number 1, my administration is announcing new grants to help returning citizens seize that second chance through education and job training and housing and legal help and children's services. Point number 2, I'm taking action to ban the box for the most competitive jobs at federal agencies. Now, the federal government is a big employer, as you know. And like a lot of big employers, on many job applications, there's a box that asks if you have a criminal record. If you answer yes, then a lot of times you're not getting a call back. And we're going to do our part in changing this. The federal government, I believe, should not use criminal history to screen out applicants before we even look at their qualifications. We can't dismiss people out of hand simply because of a mistake that they made in the past.
You know, he said he's going to take... I laughed there at the beginning because I'm going to take executive authority to do this thing that I can do. You take executive authority to do any damn thing you want. He hasn't... Don't let Congress get in your way. I mean, he says this as if we're supposed to take that part seriously. Now, I don't disagree. I don't disagree out of hand that prisoners and people that have served time ought to get a second opportunity, ought to get a second chance to start clean. And if you don't want to have the criminal record box on the first page, okay, have it on the 10th page. At some point, it's going to come up. At some point, that question is going to get asked, and rightfully so. But if employers, including the federal government, think that drug offenses don't rise to the level of excluding somebody from a job search, then so be it. I do not like, as you know, I do not like mandatory sentencing anyway. Why have mandatory sentencing? If you have mandatory sentencing, you don't need a judge. All you need is a laptop computer up there on the desk and give it a robotic. If you give it a robotic gavel, well, it'll be fine. The computer can slap the wood to wood. Wham, wham. At any rate, I just thought it was cute that he's finally not shy about using executive authority, which I'm very proud of the president. You know, he's gotten past that hang-up about using executive authority. It is Tuesday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show, American values with Midwestern common sense.
And while I'm at it, talking about executive authority, and here's why I laugh. A newly leaked internal Department of Homeland Security memo produced for an off-the-record agency reveals that the Obama administration is now actively planning to circumvent a federal court injunction that suspended part of last November's deferral-based amnesty initiative. The document, apparently prepared as a follow-up from a DHS regulations retreat last summer, appears to be almost guaranteed to reignite concerns in Congress as well as federal judges in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Last June, 4 months after a Texas federal judge ordered a freeze in the president's DAPA and expanded DACA programs, the Immigration Reform Law Institute filed briefs in these cases. DHS's immigration policymakers apparently held a regulations retreat to discuss, quote, different options for open market, now listen to this, employment authorization documents. That's a work permit. From a memo recording these discussions, we now know that the Obama administration, DHS, has, rather than slowing down and allowing the courts to assess the constitutionality of its enforcement, it's been gearing up to roll out at least one of the 4 plans drawn up at the meeting, each one designed as an end run around the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. He's going to jam himself up here in the end, and then, well, all of these things will get, provided there's a common sense election in November of 2016, most of these things, these garbage initiatives, these initiatives that give illegal aliens better benefits than veterans, these programs that give better benefits to illegal aliens so that the Democratic Party can stack the polling place, which is what this is all about. Make no mistake, Social Security was about packing the polling place. It wasn't about taking care of Grandpa and Grandma. Believe what you want in the goodness of men, but the fact is it's politics, and it wasn't about the goodness of men. It was about keeping people in power, the Democratic Party specifically. The same reason that Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, although he was against it for most of his life. He signed it, a bill that was pushed through primarily by Republicans who actually believed in civil rights. The Democrats put it through, and I can't even repeat here on this program what Lyndon Baines Johnson said right after he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1965. It wouldn't be in good taste what he said. It wouldn't be in good form for me to repeat what he said. But you know, if you've read it all, you know exactly what he said. And these bills about creating work permits and keeping families together and not tearing families apart, garbage. Would it keep some families together? Of course it would. Don't question me. You know what I'm saying. Don't look at me like that. Of course it would, but that's not the point here. That's not the bottom line. That's not the political move here. The political move is to turn Texas blue by flooding Texas with illegal aliens and having the federal government handcuff Texas as best as possible until Texas is overrun. If Texas turns blue, the republic is over as we know it. Texas is really the only thing standing between a landslide Democratic presidential victory every single time and not. Anyhow, let's quickly go to the hotline. Brian is on the line. Brian, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. I was reading on the Drudge Report last night about how the amount of Africans that are coming to this country are increasing. And I was thinking, Black lives must matter, so they need to knock that Black Lives Matter slogan off, because if Black lives didn't matter, why would they be coming to America?
Well, that's a good question, and I appreciate you.
You ask yourself those questions, Steve.
Well, I get where you're coming from, Brian. I appreciate you checking in. I do appreciate you checking in, and always with the poignant questions. And you can join the conversation. You can pose those questions as well. 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Do I see our good friend Steve is on the line checking in this morning? Steve, welcome back.
Good morning. I'm going to say what I have continued to say from the beginning.
That'll be different.
We have a Muslim president that is a communist sympathizer.
Stop. Hold on.
Country.
I think you've got it backwards. I think you've got it totally backwards. I think we have a Marxist president who is a Muslim sympathizer. That's what I think. I think you've got it backwards.
Acceptable. That is that. Either way, I don't care how you cut it. He's not for America. He's not for America's ideals. Every time you vote Democratic, I'm sorry to tell you, it's no longer the Democratic Party. It's you're fringing, if you're not already there, on the Socialist Party. And like I've said, anytime you approach somebody that seems to be about 65 or older, you figure out real quick that they either know what's going on and they agree with you, or they refer back to FDR, like my mother.
Well, there
Very
you go.
Serious about that.
Well, no, I understand that, because they were lifelong Democrats, and therefore they stick with it. Hey, let me share something with you here, Steve. See how this. Have you had breakfast yet?
No.
All right, well, let's see if this settles.
Go for it. I got strong guts.
Yeah. For the 7th time in a row and for every year over the last 7 since he took office, in a new Gallup poll, an annual list of the nation's most admired men, President Barack Obama is number one. President Barack Obama is the most admired man in America, Steve. And I just wanted to share that with you before you had breakfast.
It's the Democratic Santa Claus, for God's sakes. He's a Democratic Santa Claus.
He's the most admired man in America. Come on, Stevie. He's the most admired man in America. You seem upset by this.
So was Santa Claus when you were 6 years old. But they're no longer 6 years old. This is real life, and he's still Santa Claus.
All right. Yeah, remember, don't eat angry, Steve, because eating breakfast angry is not good for your digestive system. Thanks for checking in. I do appreciate it. 888-900-9966. Don't eat breakfast angry. Good Lord. You know, and chew with your mouth shut, would you please? 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
All right, I'll do this real quickly because, I had somebody say, well, what's Marxism? I'm like, all right. I can explain this. It's the doctrine that the state throughout history has been the device of the exploitation of the masses by a dominant class. The class struggle has been the main agency of historical change. Say, Black Lives Matter might come to mind. And that the capitalist system, America, containing from the first the seeds of its own decay, will inevitably, after the period of the dictatorship of the proletariat, be superseded by a socialist order and a classless society. Reparations, income inequality, the alleged war on women, the end of private property, collective ownership of the means of production, the centralized ownership of banks. I mean, come on. But I'll do my best to make sure that you guys understand. Most of you probably do, but a refresher course never hurts. All right, it's Tuesday here on the Steve Gruber Show. Our next guest, J.D. Gordon, former Pentagon spokesman, talking about Iran now has gone from snubbing its nose at us to closing its doors. J.D. Gordon, welcome to the program.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show.
Glad to have you here. All right, so we've gone from, us having a economic blockade, if you will, of Iran, to them turning around and saying, well, we don't want your stuff here, and blocking consumer goods from the United States. Bring me up to speed.
Well, basically, now that the sanctions are going to be removed on Iran, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, says, well, we don't want any U.S. goods here because they're immoral, essentially, is what he's telling Iranians. So we've actually been selling them some things over the past year. That includes medical devices, food, seeds, things like butter. But he doesn't want them. He doesn't want them anymore. He wants to hurt U.S. industry. I think this just shows, Steve, that the president's strategy to appease Iran over the nuclear program in order to get better behavior for them or to get more friendly relations just failed. I mean, when the president was inaugurated in January 2009, what did he say? He said to our enemies, we will extend a hand if you are willing to unclench your fist. Well, guess what? He extended his hand, and dictators around the world, whether they're in Iran, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, China, they just clench both fists.
Well, if they had their fingers crossed behind their back at a minimum, right? So here's let me
at a minimum.
Yeah, at a minimum. So let's talk about this. That was the president's public strategy, but his private agenda may well have been served. I mean, there are people out there, and we just had a couple of callers. That's why I bring this to your attention, that believe his sympathy toward Islamic republics and Iran and so forth is all part of his bigger picture to marginalize the United States, which he has been pretty successful at over 6.5 years.
Well, there's a lot to be said for that. I think a lot of deans around universities around the country would do similar things because the president just didn't fall out of the sky. He's a product of the university system because the left, the international left, has taken over our universities. If you're a conservative professor, you don't get tenure. You get kicked out of there. It's like Hollywood.
So wait a second. Are you telling me here in an open forum The Barack Obama is a product of the privileged class in America?
I would say so. He's an elite. I mean, if you look at his track record, he's essentially an elite acting on their behalf. He believes that the United States is a country, and he reminds us about this quite often. We're a country of slavery, Jim Crow laws, decimation of Native Americans. So, he talks about this openly, but, that's the word on campus. It's all the rage. So the president just didn't come out of nowhere. He represents these elites on campus, and a lot of university professors and deans would do the same exact thing. Look, Bernie Sanders would probably be even worse.
Well, yeah, that's certainly true. Well, I don't know if he'd be worse. We're on the line with J.D. Gordon, former Pentagon spokesman here. But as you look, you're right. He denigrates the United States as a society of slavery and so forth. Although America inherited slavery, we certainly didn't create it. We ended it after just about 4 decades. So we got rid of it, or 6 decades, I suppose. We had less slaves. Brazil had 6 times as many people in slavery, and Iraq and Iran had more slaves than the entire Western Hemisphere combined. Why don't they teach that in school?
Well, because it doesn't fit their agenda. I think that they're very narrow and very parochial in their view. But, what I would say to people on campus is, okay, if you think the United States is bad, well, do you like Russia better or Iran? I mean, look at how they treat people in Iran. If you're accused of adultery, you get stoned. If you're gay, they hang you. The Islamic State, they do even worse. They behead you. Is that better than our model? So I think when you weaken the United States from within, it's even worse.
And they've got it backwards because President Bill Clinton clearly showed us that you need to first get stoned and then commit adultery. See, and if he'd had it the other way around. So if he had right. he's I'm sorry, JD, he's backwards, right? I have to laugh sometimes because otherwise I would just cry at the direction that we're being taken.
It's pretty sad, but, I'm really glad you mentioned Marxism at the beginning of the segment because, when the Soviet Union was falling apart, Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, he sent a letter to Gorbachev. He says, look, communism is falling apart. I suggest you study Islam. So today, the people that supported the communists in the past, they support Islamists because that's the main challenge to the United States and to the West. It used to be cool to be communist. The Che Guevara shirt-wearing people. Well, now those people pull for the Islamists. So that's why I think you see this shift towards even in the elites today giving a pass. The president won't even say radical Islam's a problem. He won't even utter the words. So I think that he's not being honest with the American people about what the threats are. I think radical Islam is the new communism. If Lee Harvey Oswald was alive today, Steve, I think he'd be an Islamist.
Well, there you go. What the Islamists have done, though, that is damn clever to me, is they have racialized, in my estimation, a religion. And so they have become themselves, and so you're Islamophobic. And they've attached all these terms of racism to a religion. But see, religion, is it not a choice? It's certainly not the way you were born. It's not your skin color. It's not your gender. So they've been able to racialize and attach all of these slights, this victimology terminology, to their religion. And it's damn clever the way they've pulled this off.
It's a brilliant plan on their behalf. It's terrible for the United States. I've got a couple columns I wrote recently in the Daily Caller about Ahmed Clockboy Muhammad, and that was a complete setup from him and his family. I hope they can go check them out in the Daily Caller, your listeners. But basically you have the Council on American Islamic Relations CARE, which according to the United Arab Emirates, who are all Muslims, by the way, the United Arab Emirates even lists this group CARE as a terrorist organization. They were founded by the Muslim Brotherhood, and every time you see some issue with Muslims here in the United States, they say, oh, Islamophobia, it's racism. I have a ton of Muslim friends here and in the Middle East. I'm on Middle Eastern TV all the time, and they're the ones being mostly killed by these radical Islamists, the Muslims.
And here's what I don't
CARE
understand.
Tries to convince Americans that we're racist. It's terrible.
CARE has been listed as a terrorist organization by some who know. But why is there not Christian phobia or a Jewish phobia or Judeophobia or whatever you want to call it? There is only Islamophobia because the Islamic people are the only ones who have been able to, like I said, racialize a religion, and it's created this conversation that's upside down and backwards. JD, 20 seconds for the last word.
Well, I think Louis Farrakhan helped in that a lot. And so, unfortunately, people got to push back on Islamophobia. It's junk. It's a fake term by the Muslim Brotherhood. So push back on Islamophobia at every chance we get.
Louis Farrakhan, all the years I was growing up, was marginalized as a kook. He's still a kook, boys and girls. There's your lesson of the day. JD, thank you for stopping in.
Thank you, Steve.
J.D. Gordon, everybody, former Pentagon spokesman. When we come back, Dr. John Lott will be with us, talking guns in America on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, welcome back to it on the Daily Beast here a day or two ago on the internet. You know, the More Truth was put out there by James Kirchick. The headline, yes, they want to take your guns away, which is true. And he points out that, they can say what they want, but the only way you would ever eliminate a mass shooting at Virginia Tech or at Columbine or Newtown would be the radical confiscation of guns. At least that's the position on the left of gun control advocates. And yes, they do want to take your guns. Our good friend and regular contributor, John Lott, back on the program. Sir, welcome back.
Good to talk to you again.
John Lott, of course, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeresearch.org. John Lott is an academic that has spent his life studying the statistics and facts surrounding guns. Yeah, and I see headlines like this, at least somebody's finally being honest about it. Hillary Clinton wants to take your guns. Barack Obama would do it today if he thought he could pull it out without starting an armed insurrection, I believe. And because in America, unlike Australia, where they took, 650,000 guns, there are 300 million guns in America. You're not just going to take them off the street by snapping your fingers and telling everybody to bring them on in.
Well, we're a lot bigger country in population, but they have more resources to try to take things. Plus, in Australia, they had used the registration system to register guns to begin with. And so it was a little bit easier for them to do it. Of course, one could argue, at least for law-abiding citizens, which is the case in Australia too, they keep these records. The licensed dealers that sell people the guns originally have to keep their little forms there, the 4473s, and just as they go and trace guns, they can go and trace who bought the guns originally and use that. Now, it's not a perfect system in terms of getting everybody, but they could get a lot of people's guns by doing that.
Well, they could, but I really believe that if somebody said we're going to take the guns, the pushback, the fabric of America would be torn. Let's be honest, America wouldn't be America if it hadn't been created by an armed revolution against random dictation of rules from across the ocean. America was born of revolution. America was born of conflict and our protection of our rights, a result of how we were created. It wouldn't be America without that Second Amendment. But yet, at least some of these folks are honest. And if you look, John, and you saw the Supreme Court, the folks there are elderly, to say the least. So if Hillary Clinton becomes president, it's likely she could get 1, 2, 3 nominations to the Supreme Court in her first term alone. That changes everything because the court has become an activist establishment. It would legislate from the bench, I believe, and I think you probably believe the same.
Well, you have 3 justices within the next year who are going to be over 80. And it's extremely unlikely that all 3 of those, or maybe even 2, could last another 4-year term or let alone another 8-year term. I mean, it's very rare to defeat somebody after 4 years in office, and there's no way those guys could make it another 8 years. So you have others that are pretty close in age to that. So, there's a good chance you could have even 4 or 5 members. But look, even if Scalia or Kennedy, who are both over 80, are replaced, if either one of them are replaced, then by Hillary Clinton or by Obama over the next year, you're going to have a 5-4 majority of justices who don't think that there's an individual right to self-defense, let alone an individual right to people owning guns.
Now, how do they overturn precedent, though? I mean, you've studied this for a long time. I mean, the precedents are now there in the Chicago
well, they just ignore it. I mean, they've done that before on lots of things. I mean, that's one reason why so many people are upset about the war in courts. They just kind of ignored what past precedents are. Conservative justices generally have been more concerned about past precedent than liberal justices have been, and following it. And so I don't look. You look at the McDonald case for Chicago, dealing with Chicago's gun ban, and during that decision, you had 4 liberal members of the court who signed dissent saying that they did not accept the ruling in the Heller decision, the Washington, D.C. case that struck down the handgun ban that was there. And they were very explicit. They said that they did not believe that there was an individual right to self-defense. So, you know, if they had been given a chance, they would have formed a majority at that time in order to strike down the Heller decision.
Sure.
So I don't think anything's changed.
Yeah, but probably not. The fact of the matter is that these elections have big consequences down the road, and you know, by the stroke of a pen, you've heard this, they would turn, you know, law-abiding citizens into criminals. But that's exactly what they would do, because common sense people, you know, average thinking people say, well, I'm not turning my gun in. And therefore, you know, the farmer out on his tractor becomes a criminal because he's not going to give up his right to self-protection or to protect his family. And then, you know, these guys that mind their own business, men and women alike, become criminals by the decision of the court, basically. I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word, Doctor.
I mean, I don't think they would ban all guns instantly. I think what would happen is that they'd ban groups of guns, you know, and gradually over time expand it. So I think that's what would happen. But look, we've already seen registration in either New York City or Chicago or California used to identify guns that they don't want allowed anymore, and then used it to confiscate guns in the United States. So you don't have to look to Australia or some other country to see the fact that they're willing to do it. And that's the universal background check system. I think the main reason they're doing it is to impose tax, but I think it's also to register.
Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Find out more at crimeresearch.org. Thank you, Doctor.